Radio 4. It's 6:05.
I should come up sometimes, see me.
Now is the winter of our discontent.
Wookiees.
Quote, unquote. We present a seasonal edition of the quotation game devised and introduced by Nigel Rees.
Hello and welcome to our annual end-of-the-year get-together in which we recall some of the sayings of the year before consigning them to the great waste paper basket of history. This year on the Quotathon, as I suppose we must call this extended edition, we have with us not only Ronald Fletcher to read the quotations, but to attribute them, Sue McGregor, for whom 1980 has meant introducing 188 editions of Woman's Hour, Brian Johnston, who has this year reached 410 not out, not age, not cricket, but editions of Down Your Way, P.D. James, the crime writer, for whom 1980 has seen the publication of her latest acclaimed novel, Innocent Blood, and Dick Vosburgh, who spent most of this year in New York looking after his play A Day in Hollywood, A Night in the Ukraine on Broadway, where it won 2 Tony Awards. Welcome all. Now, I offer each question to an individual. If he or she doesn't know the answer, then I throw it open to the others. Sue McGregor, during 1980, who said, and on what occasion...
Ladies and gentlemen, as you probably know, World War III was announced today. We are bloodied, but not yet bowed. I've always thought that Judas was one of the least attractive characters in human history.
Now, I think that this was a theatrical occasion, wasn't it? And was it possibly something to do with the production of Macbeth, which was rather bloody, a very bloody production? Peter O'Toole was in it. And Timothy West, who is in charge of the Old Vic, disowned the production, didn't he? Said it was nothing to do with him. And somebody stood up and said he was Judas-like to have said it. Could it have been Peter O'Toole himself? Or no, it couldn't. It possibly was somebody else who wasn't Peter O'Toole. Was it Brian Forbes?
Yes, it was Brian Forbes. As you took a little long to get that, I'll insist on knowing what his role was in this production.
Brian Forbes was the director
yes,
of
he was.
Macbeth.
Well done.
Yes.
Right. Now then, Brian Johnston, who said these words and what was the occasion?
We've got to take the gloves off, and we're in a bare-knuckle fight on some of the things we've got to do.
Oh, yes, it's this gentleman who is now head of CBI, and his name, he used to look after Fords. I can't use a car name, but I will. His name is Sir Terence Beckett, and he was referring to gloves off, I suppose, with Maggie or something, which was most ungentlemanly of him.
Yes, can you remember the occasion? He's the Director General.
Yes, it was at the CBI conference, a bright, most extraordinary statement to make.
Well, we're not here to discuss it, but...
Not on Christmas Day, but can't do that to a lady.
Sir Terence Beckett said this. He's the new Director General of the CBI. For you, Phyllis James, as we call you, rather than P.D. James, as it's Christmas, some first words of a novel, already a little famous, although it was only published this year. Who wrote the novel, and what is it called?
It was the afternoon of my 84th birthday, and I was in bed with my catamite when Ali announced that the Archbishop had come to see me.
I think it was on the short list for the Booker Prize.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Was it the Burgess novel?
By which you mean?
By which I mean it's gone completely out of my head. I think I ought to get 2 marks for that.
I'll give you half a mark for Burgess. You ought to give me his whole name.
Anthony Burgess's
Yes.
nearly prize-winning novel, but not quite.
It was unearthly something, but I can't remember what the something was.
It was Earthly Powers.
Of course it was. Yes.
I don't think I'll give anybody any marks there, but I'll give 1 mark to Phyllis for getting Anthony Burgess. Dick Vosburgh, some opening words for you too. They come from a film that opened this year. What was it called? Who speaks the words when the music stops?
It's showtime, folks.
Yes, indeed. That is Roy Scheider in All That Jazz. That's a series of rather self-conscious scenes showing the ritual of every morning of a Bob Fosse, because Bob Fosse is really the hero, although he has another name. And it's every time he wakes up, we have exactly the same montage, folks, followed by "It's Showtime."
That's right. All That Jazz collected 4 Oscars this year and won the Best Picture Award at the Cannes Film Festival. Back to Sue McGregor. Who said, and what is his job?
It'll take something of the magnitude of a war to stop the Olympic Games.
Could it possibly have been Lord Killannin, who was president of the IOC?
It could possibly have been him, but it wasn't.
But it wasn't.
So I'll offer it to other people. Brian?
Well, he was secretary of the Football Association before he retired and became what he was when he made that statement. And his name has slipped my memory, but he put up a great fight throughout the summer. And I'll get him sometime, but he was secretary of the Football Association.
Well, what was he when he made this remark?
Oh, well, he's secretary of the Olympic Federation, or whatever it's called.
You ought to know this, Brian. He was the chairman of the British Olympic Association.
That's right.
His name?
He's a
Phyllis?
very well-known name.
Sue?
Dennis Follows.
Yes, Sir Dennis Follows.
Dennis Follows.
You got that on the rebound, Sue, so I'll give you half a mark for that. Brian Johnston, the one aimed at you. This phrase was by no means coined this year, but it was recalled for a special reason. What was the reason?
So what we're watching here is a clear case of man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah, well, this is a very famous one, and thank you for giving it to me, because it was made by the great broadcaster of cricket of all time, John Arlott. It was referring to, there was a chap called Tufty Man who bowled slow left arm for South Africa, and he clean bowled George Mann with a very good ball, and John Arlott, who was on tour with MCC, coined this marvellous phrase, and man's inhumanity to man. And that was it.
I'll give you 1 mark, Brian. Now, the original phrase, anybody, any idea? I mean, obviously it's an old thought, but who put it in that form? Anybody know for an extra mark?
Would it be Pope?
Not Pope.
Or Dryden, perhaps?
Not Dryden. Between Pope and Dryden and John Arlott. Sort of midway.
Man's humour makes something...
Robbie Burns.
Robbie Burns, yes, well done.
Robbie Burns, yes.
Well done, you get your mark there, Brian. Yes, man's inhumanity to man. He wrote it in a poem called Man Was Made to Mourn. Following very much on from cricket, Phyllis James, do you know who said this in 1980 and what was the occasion?
Cricket is the greatest thing that God ever created on earth. Greater than sex. Although sex isn't too bad either. But everyone knows which comes first when it's a question of cricket or sex.
Now that was said, I think, by a playwright.
Yes.
It was said by Harold Pinter.
Yes.
And I must say, I find it a very surprising opinion, considering the beauty of his wife, still.
Well, yes.
If he'd said it on the way to the register office with me, I don't think I'd have married him. Now, I don't think it was on that occasion.
What he meant was you can play cricket and then have sex. It didn't mean that cricket came before sex as something better than the other, but he meant in time.
You
go out,
no,
you make...
not at all, Brian.
Yes, you make 100, you take a hat-trick, you go home, you have sex. That's it.
And if you have sex on a cricket field, you're walking in a Pinter wonderland.
We're still looking for the occasion. It wasn't on his marriage to Lady Antonia Fraser. It was some other milestone he reached this year, Harold Pinter.
Wasn't his 50th birthday?
Yes, it was his 50th birthday, Sue. Well done. Now, Dick Vosburgh, the one for you. The person who made this next remark also has something to do with cricket, but that is completely irrelevant to the remark in question. Who, commenting on what, said this year...
It's no more than I deserve.
I think I'll have a glass of water. No, it's a very good question. Next question?
Brian
It's
Johnston?
Parky time. Michael Parkinson, when he was told that he was going to get £1.25 million, which is much less than I get, but he said that it's no more than I deserve, which, is fairly modest, I suppose, really.
Indeed, it was Michael Parkinson referring to the enormous, over £1 million.
He's getting from Australia, not from... Yeah.
That's right, for presenting his chat show on Australian television over the next few years. I'm delighted to tell you, Brian, you're leading at the moment. Well done.
No.
Thank you if you've written to us on quote-unquote during the year. We've received thousands of your letters, and for that reason we apologise if we can't acknowledge them. The events of the year have, as always, been reflected in some of the graffiti that you've spotted. This one, sent in by Jean Lyons of Harpenden, was observed after a certain event in May.
The SAS smoke more embassies than Hurricane Higgins.
Robert Bevan of West Wickham points out that London Transport has been running a poster campaign with the slogan,
"The last train runs later than you think."
and he noticed the additional comment,
Why pick on that one?
well, you've been keeping your ears open for eavesdroppings too. Mrs. Y.A. Chappell of Ashted is very precise about this overheard remark. She gathered it on Monday, the 11th of November, in the Army and Navy store, Guildford.
They're last year's Christmas cards. You can tell by the feel of them.
And lastly, during this season of goodwill, let us recall the remark overheard by Mr. D.E. Jones of East Finchley, made by a woman to a man during a quarrel they were having on a train going to Forest Gate.
It's all right for you. You don't care about me. Left alone in that flat night after night while you're out enjoying yourself at the Salvation Army.
Thank you for those. Well, now I'm going to give the panel an opportunity to make amends for not having sent a Christmas card to someone who's been in the news this year. An opportunity to send a Christmas greeting accompanied perhaps by a suitable quotation. Sue McGregor.
You want it to go to somebody who's been the most overquoted person in the year. Well, I send it to that poor chap called A. Palace Spokesman, from whom we've heard quite a lot this year. He had to spend a great deal of time denying that a royal engagement was imminent and that one particular royal engagement had taken place in a train in a Gloucestershire little siding in dead of night. And my message, misquoting a well-known carol to A. Palace Spokesman, would be sidings of comfort and joy.
Brian Johnston, who would you send your card to?
Well, a lady who, although she may have been overquoted, I love listening to every time, and you heard her voice at the start, and that's Barbara Woodhouse. I think she's absolutely marvellous. And I'd love to send her a Christmas card with a message, and I think it would read, "Best bitches for a terribly yappy Christmas, and good walkies after din-dins on Boxer Day."
Excellent. Phyllis James, an overquoted person or persons?
Well, I feel that politicians are always overquoted. So to be fair, I was going to send one both to Mr. Foote and to Mrs. Thatcher. And Mr. Foote will have a quotation from Oscar Wilde, which says that a man cannot be too careful in the choice of his enemies. And Mrs. Thatcher will have one from Cicero, which says persistence in one opinion has never been considered a merit in political leaders.
Yes, well, a bit late for getting to her this Christmas, perhaps by next Christmas. Dick Vosburgh.
One of the most overquoted men of this past year, I suppose, has been poor Billy Carter. And I thought in my Christmas card that I'd quote Groucho Marx's lyricist, the brilliant E.Y. Harburg, and write this to Billy Carter. Oh, Libya, oh, how you love Libya. Libya, that generous country. When at Christmas you imbibe, do not sing, here comes the bribe.
Dick, did you see one of the nice quotes from his mum, Ms. Lillian, during the year, as a sort of postscript to the Jimmy and Billy era, which is over now? Ms. Lillian actually said to an interviewer, "Sometimes when I look at my children, I say to myself, Lillian, you should have stayed a virgin."
Right, now back to the quiz and to some Christmas quotations, not from 1980, but from earlier years. Whose Christmases were these, Sue McGregor, and in which country did he spend them?
One Christmas was so much like another. In those years around the Seatown corner now and out of all sound except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6.
That's rather nice. I thought it was starting off by being a Victorian and sentimental writer, but it isn't at all, is it? It's very 20th century. And it's not Dylan Thomas on the coast of Wales. I'm baffled, actually. I like it, but I can't think who the heck it was.
I would say it was certainly 20th century.
Sue will kick herself when she finds out, because you ruled him out.
Oh, it was Dylan Thomas.
It was Dylan Thomas.
Yes.
Talking about Wales.
Talking about Christmas in Wales, yes.
From a radio talk called A Child's Christmas in Wales, first broadcast in 1945. Brian Johnston, with which year and with what circumstances would you associate the phrase?
Berlin by Christmas.
It must have been some stupid remark made in 1940, I should think. Or 1939, actually.
It might have been said in those years, but more particularly...
Wasn't Freddie Laker buying all those planes and flying them?
No, in fact, it must. Now I come to it must be 1944 when we all thought we were going to get to Berlin by Christmas.
Would it be Bing Crosby who said, "I want a song by Berlin by Christmas"?
And he got it, didn't he?
Yes.
He got it, yes. No, it refers to 1914. The phrase expresses the then British belief or hope that the war, which started in August 1914, would have been over by Christmas. In 1939, the phrase "all over by Christmas" was used, but in fact that had also been used in several previous wars, none of which had been over by Christmas. Phyllis James, a description of another Christmas ends with these words.
Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
How does the description begin? And you can have a bonus if you can tell me who wrote it or the year in which he wrote it.
Oh, is it Dickens? It
No.
must be Dickens. It isn't Dickens?
It isn't Dickens. Dick?
It is Clement C. Moore, and it is called A Visit from St. Nicholas, and the first line is, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, ...
As quiet as a mouse.
When all through the house, not a creature was stirring,
Really,
not even a mouse.
Not even a mouse.
Well, you get 2 marks for that, Dick, and an extra mark for Clement Seymour. Can you get 1 extra mark for the Christmas he was referring to? The year?
1887.
No, it was 1822. Correct. But anyway, you've done very well. And the question aimed at you, Dick, whose mournful Christmas greeting is this, and where might you have encountered it?
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year our troubles will be miles away.
You would have encountered it in the movie Meet Me in St. Louis, and it's Judy Garland singing. And you would also have encountered it in the movie The Victors, when it was sung most ironically as the background to an execution.
Yeah. Really? Well, I think I'll give you a bonus mark for that one. Yes, from the film Meet Me in St. Louis, which was released in 1944. Now back with a bump to more sayings of 1980. These are all from politicians. Sue McGregor, who said publicly, to the great embarrassment of whom and on what occasion?
Dennis Healey is my candidate.
Well, it must have been a Conservative. If it caused embarrassment. Could it possibly have been Mrs. Thatcher's bête noire, Mr. Heath?
No.
No.
It was on a television programme, wasn't it?
It was,
Just
Phyllis.
before the election of the Socialist leader. Now, which member? And it was a member of the Cabinet.
It was Lord Thornycroft.
Yes, it was.
Lord Thornycroft, chairman of the Conservative Party.
I got it at the same time that you did, really. Don't I have half a mark?
No. I exercise my prerogative in these matters and say no, because you're doing very well in the score. Said about Dennis Healey during an edition of the television programme Question Time. I'll give you a mark for that. You said it was on a television programme.
Question Time.
Brian Johnston, which politician said this in 1980, and by what name is the person referred to also known?
Oh, dear.
I do not think I could decently refuse to respond to these appeals, which have far exceeded in scale and intensity anything I'd expected. Besides, if I did, my wife might divorce me.
Good gracious. Now, which politician had a wife? Was it the Chancellor of the Exchequer?
No.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, I can't get that one.
Phyllis James?
It was Michael Foot.
Yes.
When he decided that he'd be a candidate for the leadership.
Right, so who was the person referred to?
Yes. Oh, he has quite a famous wife, hasn't he?
Yes, she
oh,
writes-
dear.
she writes
She
books.
writes, yes. She's a journalist.
Her
She
name
writes
might
books.
be Jill Craig.
It might well be, yes.
Jill Craig, all right, Brian, you got in there. You squeezed your way in. Phyllis James, which politician said this in 1980 and at what point in his career?
For all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never end.
This was a very moving and splendid speech, so I am told, by the loser Kennedy when he conceded that Ronald Reagan would be the Republican candidate.
Well, you got the wrong party, I think. It was
Oh, well, have I?
Yes, it was Democratic Party.
Oh, yes, Democrat. I do beg your pardon.
Conceding
Yes.
to...
Oh, yes, a small matter.
conceding to...
That's it, conceding defeat
Lillian's son.
in the fight for the nomination for the Democratic Party, wasn't it?
Yes, and who won it?
It was Carter, of course.
Yes. He just failed, Edward Kennedy had just failed to get his party's nomination to run for the presidency, and I think this quotation is about the only thing we've had this year which sounds like a good old-fashioned quotation. Dick Vosburgh again, which politician and in what circumstances referred to...
That great president who might have been Hubert Horatio Hornblower.
And now it's time for Brian Johnston to come to my aid.
I can't do anything about that.
This was a gaffe.
Oh, in that case, it must have been Reagan. Thanks for the hint.
But it wasn't, no.
It was Carter.
It was President Carter.
The other gaffer.
And the occasion... This occurred during President Carter's acceptance speech at that same Democratic Party assembly when, committing an appalling foot-in-mouth, he said Hubert Horatio Hornblower instead of Hubert Horatio Humphrey. The Times newspaper in this country, being a newspaper of record, put the right word in instead of the wrong one. Isn't that nice of them? Let me just give you the score. Brian Johnston was in the lead, but now Dick Vosburgh is out in front. Well done.
I'm at the 5.
Very competitive, very good. President Carter's foot in mouth was a hard one to top, but our definition of a foot in mouth embraces many forms of verbal misfortune, and I have some more examples for you now. There was a delightful moment on the Today programme earlier this year, which went like this.
And we'll look at the sports news with Chris Ray.
In the second test against Australia in Perth, England are facing defeat. Requiring 273 runs to make Australia bat again, they had made 264 for the loss of 7 wickets at tea on the 4th day. Well, Norman Cudderford has been following play in our test match special studio. Norman, can you bring us up to date with the sad details?
No, I'm awfully sorry, I can't.
I think it might be interesting why that actually happened. I mean, he'll be known for it for life. But what happens sometimes that the person who's coming on next, if there's a recorded thing, rehearses what they're going to say. And in fact, Chris Ray was rehearsing what he was going to say. So Norman Cudderford thought he was just rehearsing. So just joking, he said, no, of course I can't. But in fact, he was on the air.
Well, that's the explanation anyway. A number of you, including Mr. H. Ellis Tomlinson of Thornton Cleveleys, were tickled back in August by a headline from The World at One.
There's been a general improvement in cross-channel ferry services hit by the French fishermen's blockade. People are getting away to and from Belgian ports without too much delay, and there's been room to spare in some cases.
Michael Scott of Kenton Harrow was listening to the BBC World Service News on the 20th of August when he heard, to his surprise,
Mr. Ronald Reagan has lost his head over President Carter.
There was a pause, and then the newsreader repeated it correctly.
Mr. Ronald Reagan has lost his lead over President Carter.
Wimbledon provided its usual crop of peculiar remarks by commentators. Bill Canham of Birmingham 17 drew my attention to this from a men's doubles game on the 2nd of July.
He doesn't miss many like that, Brian Gottfried. He practices assiduously, the only married man on court.
Brian Johnston, in other years, you've been famous for these sort of things. Have you committed any gaffes, foot in mouth this year?
Nothing very bad. No, I keep on being reminded of perhaps my last one I did, was when I received a letter after the West Indies had been playing at the Oval from a lady who signed herself Miss Mainpiece. And she said, we like your commentaries, you must be more careful because a lot of children listen. And when we came over, Michael Holding was bowling to Peter Willey. And you said, welcome to the Oval, where the bowler's holding the batsman's willy.
Now, usually on Quote Unquote, we don't have time for requests, but as this is an extended edition, here goes. Mr. S. Oliver of York writes to say, please could you play the live commentary on the illumination of Fleet on the night of the Spithead Naval Review in 1937. I'm sure the recording would cause a few laughs. Well, indeed, it probably will, Mr. Oliver, even in this slightly shortened version. Let me just say first that the commentator, Lieutenant Commander Tommy Woodruff, was one of the BBC's leading commentators in the 1930s, and on this occasion he found himself back on board his old ship. And it was the end of a very tiring and emotional day for him.
At the present moment, the whole fleet is lit up. When I say lit up, I mean lit up by fairy lamps. We've forgotten the whole Royal Review. We've forgotten the Royal Review. The whole thing is lit up by fairy lamps. It's fantastic. It isn't a fleet at all. It's just... it's fairyland. The whole fleet is in fairyland. I'm sorry, I was telling some people to shut up talking. The whole fleet is lit up in fairly lamps. And each ship is outside. Now, as far as I can see, it's about, I suppose I can see it down about 5 or 6 miles. The ships are all lit up. They're outlined, the whole lot. Even destroyers are outlined. In the old days, you know, destroyers used to be outlined by a little kind of pyramid of lights. And nowadays, destroyers are lit up by the outline themselves. In a second or two, we're going to fire rockets, and we're going to fire all sorts of things. And you can't possibly see them. You'll hear them going off, and you may hear my reaction when I see them go. Because I'm going to try and tell you what they look like as they go on. But at the moment, there's a whole huge fleet yard. The thing we saw this afternoon, this colossal fleet, lit up by lights. And the whole thing is in fairyland. It isn't true. And as I say it, it's gone. It's gone. No magician who ever could have waved his wand could have waved it with more acumen than he has now at the present moment. I was talking to you in the middle of this jam, in the middle of this thing. And what's happened is the fleet's gone, disappeared and gone. We had 100, 200 warships all around us a second ago. And now they've gone.
Well, that familiar BBC figure, a spokesman, commented later, "We regret the commentary was unsatisfactory, and for that reason it was curtailed." Naturally, many listeners concluded that Tommy Woodruff had himself been lit up. But he denied this, saying he'd been working too hard and his mind just went blank. The incident didn't put paid to any further broadcast appearances. He continued to do commentaries until the Second World War, and he died 2 years ago.
And he had a musical named after him, The Fleet's Lit Up at the Hippodrome, George Blackburn. So that's why we always have orangeade in the commentary box.
Quite often on Quote Unquote, we examine the titles of books and plays and television programs because titles like those are so often based on quotations. This year has seen a number of new productions which have found their titles that way. Panel, tell me where they come from in each case. Sue McGregor, one of the most talked about television plays of 1980 was by Dennis Potter. Why was it called
Blade on the Feather?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm afraid I don't know. It was a marvellous play, but I don't know why it was called Blade on the Feather.
I'll offer it to Phyllis Jones.
Isn't it a quotation from the Eton Boat song?
Ah, it's to do with rowing.
And yes, and it was a play about betrayal and about, you know, the whole public school ethos.
Yeah. Brian, you must have sung this in your time.
Yes, I have, although I was a dry bob. I always used to sing that like mad.
You were a what?
A dry bob. That means I played cricket. But it didn't apply to the actual race which Eton took part in, but I heard a marvellous thing which someone heard on the towpath last year at the boat race, which was marvellous. There was a woman there, and she was talking to one of our experts, and I come every year to watch this boat race. Do just tell me one thing. She said, why do the two same teams always get into the final, which wasn't there?
Yes, Blade on the Feather is a rowing term which occurs in the Eton boating song like this.
Rather remarkable. I think if you looked on the date of that record, it says the Musical Society, Eton Musical Society, 1928. And at the back there, that very nice treble voice was me.
Oh.
I was in the music. But it may not be the same one. We certainly recorded it was put out by his master's voice in those days.
Are you getting royalties?
Not yet.
Well, now, Brian Johnston, a popular television series this autumn was based on a story by H.E. Bates. Why was it called
Fair stood the wind for France.
I've always wondered myself. It was a lovely book. I couldn't quite know why he did it. It's a quote from something.
It is.
Must be Shakespearean.
Not Shakespearean, but a contemporary of Shakespeare's.
Newbolt or something.
Well, not Ben Johnston.
No.
Not Marlowe, is it?
Not Marlowe. A poet, a contemporary of Shakespeare's.
Oh, Andrew Marvell.
No, Michael Drayton, from the poem Agincourt, fair stood the wind for France when we ourselves advanced. Brian, I had wanted to ask you why R.F. Delderfield's novel, To Serve Them All My Days, currently on BBC One, was called that. And it sounds like a quotation, but nobody seems to know where it comes from. It sounds like a line of a hymn or a prayer. So if anybody knows, I should be delighted to be told, and we'll tell you in the next series. Phyllis James, also on BBC One this year, has been a drama series written by Reg Gadney about goings-on after the Second World War. Why was it called?
Forgive Our Foolish Ways.
Oh, this is a hymn. Dear Lord and Saviour of mankind, forgive our foolish ways.
Dear Lord and Father of mankind, yes.
Dear Lord and Father, yes.
I'll give you an extra mark if you can tell me who wrote the hymn.
I don't think it was Wesley.
Not Wesley.
Neil.
No, it was...
A lot of them are Mrs.
No, this was an actual man, this one. J.G. Whittier. Dick Vosburgh. A controversial play which upset the government, the British government this year, was performed at the Theatre Royal Stratford East and then went on to the Royal Court. It was by Howard Brenton and Tony Howard and was originally called Ditch the Bitch, but then it was retitled
A Short, Sharp Shock.
Now, that's a phrase which was used by William Whitelaw and by a number of Home Secretaries over the years to describe a form of punishment for young offenders. But where did this phrase, a short, sharp shock, originate?
Yes, it's Gilbert and Sullivan. I think it's the Mikado.
It is the Gilbert and Sullivan. It's the Mikado. Can you describe the circumstances?
It's the description of execution.
Yeah, well, yes, it's Pooh Bah, Pish Tush and Coco saying that none of them wants to volunteer for execution.
Sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock, in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a chippy jumper on a big black block. To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock, in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a chippy jumper on a big black block.
And for our final quiz round, we return to things that have been said this year. Sue McGregor, I think that the best new catchphrase of the year, apart from walkies, is this one. With whom would you associate it, and how did this person change during the year? The phrase?
I think we should be told.
You don't even recognise the phrase, although I know that you read the organ in which it appears.
Oh, it sounds as if it comes from Private Eye, if that's the organ to which you are referring. I think we should be told.
Anybody?
I have to give up on that one.
This is a phrase of Sir John Juners. He is the editor of the Sunday Express. He writes a very controversial column, or very outspoken column, in that paper called Current Events, which Private Eye parodies on a regular basis. He changed because he was knighted this year. I think we should be told. He also says, pass the sick bag, Alice, and is always going on about Octa Muchty. When he got his knighthood, one of the papers sent up a reporter to Octa Muchty, and nobody had ever heard of Sir John Juners. Brian Johnston, who borrowed this next phrase, borrowed it during 1980, and what was the person worried about? The phrase?
Body fascism.
I don't know. I've seen it recently.
Sue McGregor knows.
Well, it was Anna Ford, I believe.
Did she?
Went to She went to a conference organised by a group called Women in Media, and it was about the image that women project on the screen and the image the public have of women. And Anna Ford said, looking at me and lusting after me is nothing less than body fascism.
Yes, she'd borrowed the phrase.
I didn't know I was a fascist. How awful.
Phyllis James, who said and on what occasion, and how had he changed this year?
Royalty puts a human face on the operations of government and provides images with which the people of a nation can identify and which they can love.
I would have thought it could have been the Duke of Edinburgh, but I don't see how he's changed. At least if he has, no one has told me that he's changed.
Well, can you get the occasion? Royalty putting a human face, etc. Brian Johnston?
Well, it was the Archbishop who was talking about the Queen Mother in the service of whatever it was, dedication to her at St. Paul's, and he made this from the pulpit.
Well done. And how had this Archbishop changed during the year?
Well, he was at one time Bishop of St. Albans, and he became the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Quite so, the Right Reverend Robert Runcie.
And he keeps pigs, or did keep pigs. Well, he must be one of the very few archbishops who have, but yeah.
Yes, the Right Reverend Robert Runcie, who was translated to Canterbury this year. Finally, Dick Vosburgh, a mere nipper compared to the Queen Mother, said this year. Who was it, and on what occasion?
To everyone who grows older, sooner or later, the sober fact of declining energies appears, which no longer make it possible to fulfill one's task as before. A moment then arrives when it becomes irresponsible to continue that task. I thus feel that, for me, the moment is approaching when I must lay down my task.
Gilbert and Sullivan. No, sorry. That was Mr. Callahan.
No.
Ah.
There is a connection with the previous answer. I'll give you that little clue.
Indeed.
Actually, the Queen of Holland.
Yes, it was,
Or
Brian.
the Netherlands.
Yes, what was she doing?
Well, she was giving up her throne and passing it on to her daughter, poor dear.
That's right, Queen Juliana of the Netherlands, back in January, telling the Dutch people that she would abdicate on her 71st birthday in April. As we draw to a close, I wonder, are there any sayings from 1980 that we've missed out? Sue McGregor, do you have a remark from the year that you treasure?
Well, I rather liked the remark that Gloria Vanderbilt made. You know, there was a biography of her this year, and she had a poor little rich girl upbringing, but she's now a very successful manufacturer of expensive and very clinging blue jeans. And she said, "I was in the Midwest when I first noticed the terrible need for help among the fuller figures." Because ladies in the Midwest in America, if I need to explain, tend to be rather large.
Brian Johnston, do you have a remark from the year?
Well, there was a quote from Margaret Thatcher, which she gave to her ladies, where all these hats, you know, when they go to the conference for the ladies at the Albert Hall. And she was talking and said there are tough times ahead. And she said, "Ladies," she said, "we've taken it lying down long enough. From now on, we must stand up with our backs to the wall," which I think is very... There was also a good remark, a friend of mine in Guildford, who spends money rather fast, and she's a lady, and she went into Barclays Bank there at Guildford the other day, and on the way in, she unfortunately met the bank manager. She got terribly flustered. And she said, "Oh, Mr. Smith, I'm so sorry, I keep on coming to this bank. I'm spending my water like money," which is right.
Phyllis James, do you have a saying from the year?
Well, one I overheard, which I think was lovely, there was a discussion about the Ayatollah, and I heard a rather sweet young girl saying, "What a way to behave for a man who calls himself a Christian." And the rather more official one, which I must say I liked very much, although I'm not sure that I got it absolutely right, was Cardinal Hume's about the Pope's visit. And I gather we haven't had a Pope visiting since the Reformation. And he said that the timing was important. We should have to fit it in between the cup final and the cricket season and avoid Wimbledon. And I thought that would give His Holiness a very good idea of our priorities here. It did rather remind me of a quotation by Ronald Blythe, that as for the British churchman, he goes to church as he goes to the bathroom with a minimum of fuss and no explanation if he can help it.
Dick Vosburgh, do you have a saying of the year?
Yes, a saying which really comes out of one of the disasters of the year. Not my joke about walking through a Pinter wonderland, but a disastrous $36 million Western, which you may have heard about, called Heaven's Gate, which was withdrawn shortly after it was shown to the critics. And a woman emerging from the cinema, where she had just spent nearly 4 hours watching Heaven's Gate, said wearily to her husband, "Just think, if we'd been on Concorde, we'd be in Paris now."
And I'd like to mention the most peculiar thing I've heard in the year. Brian Walden introducing Weekend World on ITV the Sunday before the American election referred to President Carter's Republican rival, Ronald Reagan. So there we are, at the end of the quiz. Let me look at the score, and by a single mark, it's a very close run thing. Brian Johnston has won. Well done, Brian. We'll be back with another series of quote-unquote in 1981, so if you feel inclined to contribute to that, then drop me a line. Nigel Rees, quote-unquote, BBC, Broadcasting House, London W1A4WW. This time, copies of the quote-unquote book of Love, Death and the Universe go to the last 3 listeners whose contributions we're reading out on the programme. They are first Mrs. M. Gresham of Limpsfield, who has something out of the mouths of a babe and or suckling. She says that in a local nursery school's nativity play, the 3 wise men were offering their gifts to the babe in the manger when one of them forgot his lines. The teacher tried in vain to prompt, without success. In desperation, she told him, "Just say anything," whereupon he looked very closely at the babe and said,
"Isn't he like his father?"
Secondly, Dr. James J. O'Donnell of Brighton has an eavesdropping of the tantalising sort. In a park in Sussex, 2 ladies passed him, and one said in a loud voice,
"And they dropped a box of bananas on it in West Wittering."
Thirdly and finally, Graham Ashford of Hampton Hill reports this piece of graffiti from a desktop at the Polytechnic of the South Bank.
Before the Thatcher government came to power, we were on the edge of an economic precipice. Since then, we've taken a great step forward.
Goodbye.
Taking part in quote-unquote were P.D. James, Brian Johnston, Sue McGregor and Dick Vosburgh. The quotations were read by me, Ronald Fletcher. The programme was devised and introduced by Nigel Rees and produced by Alan Nixon.